Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Quigley on Divorce, a behind-the-scenes look. I'm your host, James Quigley. I am thrilled today to do something that's completely out of the box, completely different than anything we've really ever done before. And this may be a multiple-part series because I am honored to be joined today by Miss Kiki Kennedy. Kiki is someone who we were introduced through a mutual friend, and Kiki, which you will learn, is already divorced.
Yes.
And in speaking with Kiki, I was mesmerized by her story, because her story, which you will hear in her words, has encapsulated so many of the things I've discussed in other episodes. For those of you who are in a divorce, or going through a divorce, who have already been divorced, or thinking about a divorce, whatever you're going through, I think Kiki's already gone through it. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. And so again, for the viewers and listeners, I first of all respect that this is a very personal and very, maybe at times emotional conversation to have. And when we talked, it was the same. And so I appreciate you sharing, because what my hope was, and really is that by you and I talking and sharing, that your experiences will resonate with others.
Yes.
You've written a book.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank
and by
you.
the way, we will get into this, but just off the bat, because we'll reference this wonderful book called The Checklist, again by Kiki Kennedy. Pictures on the back. Really, really powerful stuff. But we'll talk more about this. But what I'm really interested in is, as we get going into your story, what I found in my job is, through the 31 years I'm doing this, is many people come to me with real uncertainty. They're not even really ready for divorce. Some people don't, maybe it's the other spouse that wants the divorce. Sometimes it's, I want the divorce, but I want to stay together for the kids. They have all of these insecurities and these emotions. So if I kind of started you there,
Mm-hmm.
and in your journey, how long were you married, first of all?
20 years.
20 years.
Technically 25. It took 5 years for the divorce to finalize.
And that, I'm going to stop. Kiki laughs about that, but 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had some really bad divorces, but even in our world here in Cook County and Lake County, DuPage County, that is a long divorce.
And I will say, it's funny, because when you've heard of other people going through a divorce and they say, oh, it took 2 years, it took 3 years, everyone in their head, or I guess at least I thought in my head, well, first of all, that's never going to happen to me. I'll never get divorced. But B, if I did, I'd shoot it out in 6 months. It would be open, close, done.
Yeah.
You have no idea what you're dealing with until that door opens.
Yeah.
What the possibilities are.
Yeah. And again, I'm gonna just try to feed off a lot of what you say, because they just make me think of so many things. Like that, for example, too, is a lot of people come into the process and think they have control over the process. And what I always tell people, and I've done this in other episodes, is you can only control what you do, what you say. And hopefully your lawyer's aligned with you, and that's not always the case. And sometimes people change lawyers and so forth, but you can't control the other person. You can't control mental health. You can't control addictions. You can't control these things that sometimes, or even the legal process itself.
And it's funny, because after being married to someone for 20 years, right, and you think, oh, I know exactly who they are and how they will react and what they will do. You have no idea. Yeah.
And I've said that before too. People have come in and said, this is pretty straightforward. And I say, I hope so.
Yeah.
No, I know my spouse and this and that. And again, it's a 50-50 coin toss, because you could get somebody you never, ever knew you were married to.
Exactly.
And is that sort of, in your 20 years of marriage, you get to this point where, let me ask you, was it your decision to divorce, or was it your spouse's? In terms of the filing?
He filed.
Okay. So 20 years, by the way, you have children?
Yes.
Okay.
4 children.
So 20 years raising 4 kids. I have 4 kids, can totally relate to sort of sometimes getting lost in the marriage because you're raising the kids. Were your kids active? Were you doing the different activities in school and all that stuff?
Very active, and I was very involved, but it was all manageable. Mm-hmm. I basically had my role, which was the home and the kids. I didn't work, and he had his role, which was the work and planning the trips, basically.
Okay.
So it was very divisive, and we each did our role very well.
Okay.
I'm not sure. At the time, we thought we both were doing it very happily. But looking back, I could see where maybe we both were doing our job.
Interesting. And it's, again, there's so many tangents that come to my mind from your story, and I think about that, where so many people, even after 20 years, mm-hmm. you almost can get lulled into thinking things are a certain way, and then you realize maybe not till after the fact that it wasn't that way.
Right. The hindsight is so powerful.
Yeah.
It makes everything so clear. But, you know, when you're in the thick of it, you don't see it, and you rationalize it, and you excuse it.
Yeah.
And you certainly don't want to muddy the waters, because that's not how it works, right?
Yeah.
You have to follow the rules. You have to do what you're supposed to do. And you're not supposed to get divorced. Yeah.
And you don't want to be the problem in the marriage.
Exactly.
So you go along with certain things maybe that are, let me ask you, were there times in your marriage where you ever did have those pause moments, for lack of a better description, where you sort of thought, this wasn't right, it didn't feel right, but that's not my job, or, you know, my job is to just move past that?
Well, there were 2 points, and they're so completely different. The first one, and this is so minor, but it was huge at the time. I think my third child was about 10 months old, and I was overwhelmed. I had 3 under 3.
Wow.
3 and under. And I remember, like I said, the roles were so divisive that there was one night that I asked my husband, could you put her PJs on? And he brought her back downstairs. I think this was probably December, January. He brought her downstairs in like a onesie. And it's like 20 degrees out. And I know that seems so minor, but it really hit me that my husband at the time had really zero involvement, right? In the
real day-to-day care of the little kids.
In the day-to-day, how to take care of a child.
He's out, his job was to go make money.
Mm-hmm. And I remember pretty quickly on when we had the first one, and he said, I'm just, no diapers. I can't do poopy diapers. I will never change a diaper. And he didn't. 4 children. But I bought it, you know? I didn't question it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, we'll get into all that. But my role as a woman at the time, for my generation, my role as a woman, my role as a wife, and my role as a mother. Whatever those roles were that were taught to me mm-hmm. and ingrained in me, I did.
Yeah.
And I was always a good student. I always did the right thing. So I was surely going to do all this right. And I did.
It's sort of an aside off of that. Looking back, do you believe that for a young woman today that may have kids, is that good? Is it bad? Or is there a balance that has to be struck within those, what we call traditional roles?
So here's the thing I've learned. There is no good, there is no bad. There is what is healthy for the relationship. Okay. And if you and your husband are on the same page, that's healthy.
Yeah.
If you're happy being home, doing all the mom things, and he's happy at work doing all the dad things or whatever else, fixing the car, whatever, mm-hmm. Then that's healthy and that works. But if someone isn't happy in their, quote, role, you need to change the role. You need to redefine the role, and you have to do that together. Otherwise, there's angst in the marriage, there's grudges, there's bitterness that starts to build up.
The resentment, yeah.
Exactly.
So, and I know you said there were maybe 2 different things that happened. Well, because if I say something, it's because if I don't, I'll forget it.
You'll forget it later.
But that made me wonder. So if you mentioned the one scenario,
Mm-hmm.
and it just, someone might look and watch that and say, it's not that big of a deal. I wouldn't want to change diapers either, but it was impactful to you.
Yes, and at the time, I don't think that I realized how impactful it was. The diaper thing really didn't get me, but I remember when he put the PJs on, and naturally I said something to him. Well, he gaslit me on it.
What do you mean by that?
So when I said those were the wrong PJs, he challenged me that I was being a little too ridiculous, and we have blankets in the house, and she's not going to freeze to death, and made me feel bad, right?
Yeah.
For wanting her to have a flannel sleeper on.
Yeah. And that's really, I'm glad you brought that up, that example,
Mm-hmm.
because everybody, and I've done a number of podcasts, I've written 3 different articles on narcissism and divorce, and a huge component of that is gaslighting.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody out there has heard of narcissism, and everybody's heard of gaslighting. But I don't think people, certainly when people are being gaslit, they don't always understand what that is. And I think you just described it perfectly. It seems so innocuous, right? But it was the turning of the tables back onto you.
Yes.
To make you feel like you were wrong, like you were a bad mother,
Right.
like any of the things, it was
and
your
that I
fault.
should be grateful he at least put the PJs on.
Right.
Even though I had asked him to.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And that's the funny thing about narcissism, which I was married to a narcissist, but I did not see it the entire time because I was in too deep.
Yeah.
He had me too controlled.
I've lectured on this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
I
so,
had no idea.
And coming up, I never knew about it, but it's through my practice. People would talk about narcissism, and I started to see the pattern where with the gaslighting and the people that I would represent that have been in that sort of abusive relationship with a narcissist, we could sit and have a very logical conversation, and then they would come back and say, yeah, but my spouse said this, and I can't do this because my spouse. They were so programmed, and that's where I really began to realize the trauma that occurs, and it's probably deeper rooted than what most people understand.
They're so good at it. Honestly, I don't even think they realize they do
Right.
it. I
That's
think
part of the disorder.
Right. They are so good at it that you truly feel that you have to be grateful for every little piece of whatever it is that they have to offer you, and that you need to be grateful for this life.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very, like I said, I didn't realize it until we separated. And some of his actions once we were separated, I don't even know what made me Google narcissism. I had no idea what that was. And when I read it, I thought, oh my gosh, every single point.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
and I think what's interesting as we get more into your story, what the real sinister nature of it is that the narcissist, part of a narcissist is that charming personality.
Oh, yes.
Everybody loves him or her. And so when you are in conflict with them, nobody can believe
right.
he or she is the source of
and they use that against you, right? They'll use their friends against you to say, well, so-and-so would never say that about me, and so-and-so thinks that's funny about me, and so-and-so thinks that's great about me.
Yeah.
It's on you that you have a problem with it.
Let me, and again, this probably might not have the same flow as a chronological conversation.
Yeah, that's okay.
But it's just interesting to me because, all right, so 20 years of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys have friend groups?
Yes.
In the community, in the, parents from school, just you guys as a couple had close friends?
Yes, and this is interesting because I didn't see it until, again, we were separated. Our friends were his friends.
Interesting.
They were all his friends who I then became friends with their wives.
Okay. And when the process started and over 5 years, are you still friends with any of those friends?
Not a single one.
Were any of those people during your marriage, during the 5 years, did any of them come to you, support you, encourage you?
Not one.
Yeah.
And 4 of them had been friends for 20 years.
Yeah.
And just poof.
I wanted you to say that. It's because, assuming that was true, because what I see again in representing people in the process is they've been abandoned. And the sad reality is they've been abandoned by people they thought, like you, were friends for 20 years, and they weren't. And you not only are going through this horrible process, but now you're going through it alone.
Yes.
And that's where, again, you speaking to anybody, and I hope everybody listens to this and watches this, because while you may feel alone, you are not alone in that there are others like you that not only have gone through this horrible process, really abused in the process, but you're here sitting here today, you've sort of come out on the other side, not that you'll ever fully heal the wounds of that, but you're moving forward in a real positive manner, writing books, you know, and I think that's really a positive message because it's one of hope.
Yes.
So going sort of kind of, again, I know I'm saying I'm jumping around, but if we go back a little bit. So you're in this, what you seem like is a fine 20-year marriage.
Right. 4
beautiful kids. They're all doing well. And then it's wonderful until it's not.
Right.
And for you, again, kind of jumping around, was there a period in time ever where you and your husband said, wait a minute, we have 4 kids, we got 20 years into this together, things happened, but let's find a way to work through this. Let's get a counselor. Let's go to the priest or the rabbi or a mutual friend or any resource, mental health professional that could help us get back on track.
There was one point where I had come to him enough times about a certain situation, and we went to counseling, and he went, both of us went,
okay. But
it was under the understanding that the counseling was for me, and he was there for support.
Right, because you were the one who was bad, you were the one at fault, you were the one who...
Right, I was the one with the problem.
Yep.
And so he had to fix me in order to fix the problem.
Right now, that's a mic drop moment, because I know there are a lot of people who are hearing that and saying, that's how it was for me, you know? And counseling never works because, again, if an individual's a narcissist, by definition, they can't even really understand in their mind that they're at fault, that they're not perfect, that you know, the world revolves around them, so I'm perfect, so the fact that we're having problems in our marriage, it has to be your fault.
Right. But we had an interesting thing happen there. There were probably a series of 3 therapists that I had gone to over about a period of 3 years.
Individually or? Okay.
As a couple.
Okay.
And then at certain times, I would ask to go alone or did go alone. And he was so smooth.
Again, the charmer.
That he had them fooled. And I remember one time going by myself and I was so confused because here I am supposed to be doing all these things, yet he's not supposed to be doing anything to address my concerns.
Right.
I very much was made to believe that my concerns were problems and that when I changed them, our marriage would be fine. He didn't have to change. And, you know, I trusted these therapists.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to one of them at one point, is it possible that it's him? Is it possible that I don't love him? Is it possible that we shouldn't be together? And they would throw books at me and resources, and no, that's not possible.
Wow.
So that's disturbing in and of itself.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think they were good therapists. The one was actually pretty well known. She had books of her own. I just think he was that smooth.
Yeah. And which is fascinating to me. It's shocking almost because, again, I'm not a mental health professional. I've sort of played that role for 31 years as part of my practice. I took psychology in college. But I have yet to see in any divorce, even with the clients I love and I know we're right, I've yet to see any marriage where each party to that marriage didn't have some contribution to what led to the marriage.
Right.
And so it just shocks me that a therapist couldn't even have that sort of cognition to say, no, I think there's some things, but even if he does have his problems, we're here working on you, but to at least acknowledge that for you.
And the turmoil in my brain from that of,
yeah.
I'm supposed to believe the medical professional, right? So is it me?
Yeah.
It is me. But at the same time, I'm looking at the therapist thinking, this is ludicrous.
Yeah.
No matter what you say, it's not going to change the way I feel about this. It's just not.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I'm like, well, then what's wrong with me that I can't change? And they're telling me I have to change, and he's telling me I have to change.
Yeah.
That's a lot to handle.
It's.
And that's where you go down that.
Yeah.
Am I nuts? Am I crazy? How is this happening? Right.
Well, it's almost like it's another layer to the gaslighting because that's his message to you.
Totally.
Right? You're nuts. You're crazy. You're the problem. You're the reason our marriage is breaking down. You got to fix yourself. And then you go to a mental health professional that's supposed to be there to help you, some of which is to validate your feelings and to give a reality check, I suppose. And then it turns into almost like gaslighting from a therapist.
Right.
And then you walk out of there going in with low to no self-esteem, coming out even worse.
And then what that does to you is it kicks you down to an even lower level that you've never seen, because now you have a professional outside of your husband.
It validates him.
Validating what he's saying. And so you really kind of throw in the towel.
Yeah.
And that's scary because that's when your marriage becomes very robotic.
Were these times when you're working with the therapists before there was any filing? Or combination?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, well before.
Okay. So in the ordinary course of your 20 years, there were things you noticed where they were building, you had these feelings, you kept going to him saying, let's get some counseling, trying to work on that.
And he would say, yes, let's get you counseling.
and then the therapist would pile on.
I'm like, wow, wrong therapist. And I know that now because once we separated, I saw a new therapist. Unbelievable. Like, she was absolutely amazing.
Got it. Yeah.
She got the whole thing.
And just to me, that's such a big part of what we try to do with our clients. And here, there's some really, really outstanding people that we know get that disorder, they get the abuse, they get the gaslighting, and it's super, super important that people. So again, that's just, a takeaway, a message is, if you're in a situation where you're feeling like, maybe you feel like you are to blame, maybe you feel like this is your fault, but then really find somebody that you can connect with, that really understands the abusive nature of that type of a relationship, and is there to support you.
Right.
Super important. So, notwithstanding going to the therapist, you're working on therapy yourself. Again, you're kind of being almost ostracized. Mm-hmm. You're then processing through, I'm trying to raise 4 kids, be a good wife.
It very much validated not just that he felt I had a problem. It really validated my whole existence as what my role was in the marriage.
What do you mean by that?
That even from, my childhood, the way I was raised, the community I lived in, there was a certain set of standards that you had to adhere to in order to be looked at as, what a good woman, right? Mm-hmm. She's doing her job. She's doing well. She has a great life. And when that therapist basically agreed with my husband, it kind of validated that whole destructive line of thinking where, yes, this is your place, this is what you are supposed to be doing, do it.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Does that, so if you don't mind, your family of origin, your background, what was modeled for you, and where did it come from?
Yes, so very strict Catholic upbringing. I didn't go to Catholic school, but we were very big into the church. My parents, church every Sunday. We had to take CCD classes, and that's a whole nother story. But that very much, just that religious upbringing, that Catholic upbringing, really messed with my head too. And it really is interesting because it very much coincides with all the other who I'm supposed to be as a woman and as a wife and dealing with a narcissist. There's a lot of shame built into all of that.
Interesting.
And that was the pattern. So naturally, I began to be attracted to that, right? Because that's my place. That's where I belong.
Okay.
And it became very normal to feel shame, to feel guilt. It was part of the package.
Yeah.
And then on top of feeling shame and guilt, keep that to yourself and be very grateful for the life you have. It was very much a shut up and look pretty existence.
So with an absence of you're entitled to feel a certain way or express how you feel within that.
You can express it. Mm-hmm. You keep that to yourself.
Can I ask you, and again, if it's too personal, I'd just say no, but do you have currently in your life, do you have a faith base, not any necessarily religious denomination, or is there a higher power that gives you hope and inspiration?
I'm very spiritual.
Okay.
But it's an energy of the universe.
Okay.
Spirituality. It's not directed toward a God. But truly, in my line of thinking, I guess one could call it a God, because to me it's all the same thing.
Okay.
Right? Whatever higher power you believe in, I believe in a higher power too. I just don't call it that.
Okay. That's interesting.
So,
because and to me, so I grew up in a very similar, very traditional Catholic. I went to Catholic grade school and through 8th grade and stuff. So, and some of the modeling of what a mom and a dad were, a husband and a wife, I mean, that's a very similar background. And as you get older, you see the human aspects of the church. And I don't think it's limited to the Catholic Church. I think it's human institutions that say, these are our rules. That church has those rules. And some of them I think are well-intended, but it's that strict adherence without recognizing we're human beings. We have emotions, and the expression of those emotions, to me, I think is, if that doesn't come through in your communication, then it would seem to me very hard to hold a marriage together.
Well, and it's not even emotion. You're just not allowed to deviate at all, and even your own line of thinking. You're not allowed to have an opinion or question. So I say that because in 7th grade, that was the year we were getting confirmed, or maybe it was 8th grade, I don't remember, becoming an adult member of the church. And my CCD teacher, who, oh gosh, I just wanted to be her. I used to babysit for her kids. I loved their family. To me, she was exactly who I wanted to be. And I remember going up to her after class one day, after we had learned about a certain part of the Bible, and I very casually and very confidently, I wasn't worried about her answer. We had learned about, I said, what if I don't believe that God is a burning bush? We learned about the passage where the burning bush is God. It is God. And I said, and I'm kind of laughing at her. I'm like, come on, right? Like, it's a burning bush. Like, it's not God. And she got very upset with me. And she wasn't willing to have a conversation about it. All she said was, if you don't believe that the burning bush is God, then you can't get confirmed.
Wow.
And I said, oh my gosh, I believe.
Wow.
Don't tell my parents.
Yeah.
I have to get confirmed, right?
Yeah.
That was pretty much my whole life.
Interesting.
Doing the right thing, which I had no idea what the right thing was, so I did what I was told was the right thing.
without, and I think what is really resonating with me is you're doing everything you were told to do without questioning it.
Without question.
And that's where in my life, I questioned everything. I do today.
I questioned it on the inside.
But
and that's my whole book. There's my character, and then there's the inside voice of my character. She questions everything, but she also denies and justifies and dismisses it just as easily. So she questions it, but it never comes out of her mouth.
Right. So internally, you give yourself whatever the answer is to your question and saying, well, this is the way it's supposed to be.
Exactly. And every time I would justify it away to keep in line with what was expected of me.
Got it. Kiki, I think I'd love to keep talking with you. I think this would be an awesome time to take a break and this conclude kind of our first segment of our conversation. I'd like to have us kind of restart and maybe go into, let's delve into, if you're okay doing it. Okay, now we've gone through this, we've gone through the counseling, now there's a filing. How does life evolve over the next 5 years? Okay?
Perfect.
So thank you for joining. We're going to be here part 2. Stay with us. And again, James Quigley with Kiki Kennedy. For those of you out there following along and listening, the book is called The Checklist by Kiki Kennedy. Very, very interesting read, very helpful, and hopefully inspirational. Take care.